Every now and then, I will release a video that is addressed to a particular recipient, oftentimes Elon Musk, as if he's actually watching my content, although I know that some people at SpaceX do, and also to others that might be in a key position to make decisions about the future of spaceflight. And now, this particular video, although it wasn't designed to be that way to begin with, now that Jared Isaacman has been renominated by Donald Trump. I believe this is the only time in the history of the United States that, or the history of NASA anyway, that an administrator was nominated, then had that nomination yanked, and then was renominated months later. But regardless, very happy that it's happened, because I do believe that Jared Isaacman is one of the less divisive and has more support from both sides of the aisle than most candidates for NASA administrator. And also, he's been to space. He knows a lot about the topic. Definitely a really good selection. So this video is now addressed to him because there's a couple of really key points that are going to be critical in his confirmation by the Senate. It's going to be arguably more difficult this time around than it was before. Before, there was real serious concern from the Senate in regards to Isaacman's connection with Elon Musk, and therefore perhaps his plans to just go ahead and dump Orion, dump SLS, going with a 100% Starship solution for the moon, which isn't going to happen before 2030. As a matter of fact, if we're looking at Starship taking care of the entire moon mission, it may take even longer than that. But now, in addition to that, Isaacman has released a manifesto of sorts about his vision for NASA. And this was not supposed to go public, but it was leaked. And so now we have a clearer vision of what Jared Isaacman is looking for. And a lot of it is pretty much focused on the idea of running NASA like a business, which really doesn't bode well for some of the scientific objectives that NASA might have, because it's kind of hard to make a profit off of these sorts of things. That having been said, though, I'm not going to focus on that particular issue. Instead, we're going to focus on the other key issue that's going to really be in play when it comes to Isaacman's confirmation, and probably his most important task that he has ahead of him. How are we going to beat China to the moon? Because let me tell you something, and I'm going to explain in the course of this video, Starship getting the job done, the original plan is highly unlikely to get us on the moon before 2030. As a matter of fact, it may even take substantially longer than that, which is one of the reasons why Acting Administrator Duffy opened up the contract again. So what I would like to propose instead is a competing HLS solution where Starship is still in the mix here. We don't take Starship out. As a matter of fact, the entire idea is to ultimately make Starship one of the primary vehicles in sustaining a permanent presence on the moon. But as far as getting to the moon first, and not only that, starting off the foundation for a permanent presence on the moon, the beginnings of a lunar base that Starship could theoretically resupply and supply a lot more materials, building materials, supplies, that sort of thing for a future lunar base. This plan utilizes everybody from Blue Origin to maybe Lockheed Martin to SpaceX as well. Let me tell you something. I've run this plan through Grok, who should be very biased in favor of SpaceX and Elon Musk. And not only did Grok like it, it also provided me with a lot of data to support why it's a good plan. Okay, folks, real quick, I have to show you a new merch drop before we get going even further. We've reopened the store. Check this out, man. And I'm wearing one of these shirts right now. I'm sure you probably noticed the 3i Atlas shirt. Look at this. Such a cool design. And then, what do we have here? What do we have here? Oh, my bad. We've got a sweatshirt. Same design. Oh, this is so cool. Let me tell you something. I'm wearing this right now, and it is so much more comfortable than any other garments that I have when it comes to t-shirts anyway. Things that I've bought at Cape Canaveral, for example, at their gift shop, the difference is so noticeable that I really can hardly stand to wear any of my Vulcan or SLS shirts anymore. I wear these instead. They're just so much more comfortable. If you're interested, all the details are in the description because the store is probably only going to be open for about the next week to week and a half, somewhere along those lines. Okay, that's enough self-promotion. Let's talk about the plan. Okay, Mr. Isaacman, let's go ahead and review the various milestones that SpaceX needs to overcome before an attempt to land on the moon can even be made by an unmanned starship. First of all, the transportation method necessary to propel the HLS solution, the lunar lander, if you will, from Earth to the moon has definitely not reached a high level of maturity yet. In order to get Lunar Starship out to the moon, the entire Starship rocket system must be a mature, human-rated system, or that's, of course, if Starship is going to handle the entire job. If it isn't, if the plan is just to rendezvous with Orion, you still need a mature Starship to propel the lunar lander out to lunar orbit. And Starship is not close to that point yet, especially given that a refueling mission has to be carried out first, or rather 10 refueling launches need to be carried out in low Earth orbit before Starship can even try to get to the moon. By way of comparison, the other solutions that are theoretically out there, for example, a modified New Glenn lander, a New Glenn Blue Moon Mark I lander modified to carry humans, or a Lockheed Martin lander. And just so you know, they've been working on a human-rated lander for quite some time, and they're almost certainly going to be presenting it to NASA if they haven't presented it already. In the case of both of those landers, the transportation system necessary to get them out to the moon already exists. In the case of the Blue Moon lander, the New Glenn is capable already of launching a Blue Moon lander out to the moon. And by the way, it's going to be launching a cargo all the way to Mars on November 9th. We're talking about interplanetary missions for New Glenn a few days away from now. Starship is nowhere near to that level of maturity. In addition to that, as far as Lockheed Martin's lander is concerned, a Vulcan Centaur has also reached a high level of maturity and could definitely launch the proposed Lockheed Martin lander out to lunar orbit as well. So if we're talking about alternatives to SpaceX, both Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin are at a higher level of maturity when it comes to getting their solutions out to the moon in the first place. If SpaceX is going to get their human landing system out to the moon, they must first make Starship a viable system that's capable of reaching orbit. It must also be capable of carrying out 10 quick refueling missions, one after the other, with a quick launch cadence, because otherwise your propellant is going to start boiling off. They're going to have a refueling depot that's reached a high level of maturity. So many milestones that need to be accomplished just to get Lunar Starship out to the moon, let alone trying to land it there. So when people talk about how SpaceX is the only competitor that's anywhere close to landing on the moon, that's actually not true at all. Both Blue Moon, a modified Blue Moon Mark I that doesn't require refueling, and the Lockheed Martin lander, neither of those require refueling, and so therefore already have the capability to reach cislunar space, which Lunar Starship does not. But that being the case, Neither the Lockheed Martin lander nor the Blue Moon Mark I are capable of carrying humans yet. Lockheed Martin's design is certainly not very mature yet, although there are aspects of it that are mature, and then the Mark I lander would require some substantial modifications in order to be able to carry human beings, although it's certainly doable. The Blue Moon Mark I is substantially larger than Apollo was, so as long as it had a viable life support system, it could definitely get the job done just as sure as Apollo did. But there are some complications. Apollo never had to rendezvous with another spacecraft in near rectilinear halo orbit, whereas this human landing system does. That burns up a lot of fuel and a lot of delta V. How do we get around that? How do we make it possible to get a modified Mark I Blue Moon lander out to Orion, or to have the two rendezvous in near rectilinear halo orbit for astronauts to transfer over for that Mark I to descend to the moon and then make its way back to this near rectilinear halo orbit to rendezvous with Orion again? Well, the fact of the matter is, it's not possible. The Mark I does not have large enough fuel tanks, assuming that we're reserving a lot of the cargo space for a small-scale crew cabin, an Apollo-sized crew cabin, if you will, for these two astronauts. There just isn't enough fuel left in the Mark I to land on the surface of the moon and then go back up to near rectilinear halo orbit. Apollo, by the way, wouldn't have been able to do that either. So what's the solution? How do we get this done with a vehicle that really wasn't designed to do it? Well, in the case of the Mark I Blue Moon, and again, I'm going to talk about that for the most part throughout this episode, more so than the Lockheed Martin solution, because the Blue Moon is far more mature and more viable for getting this job done in time. The Mark I might be able to land on the moon, and if you had another ascent module, an ascent Mark I, if you will, that had been pre-positioned a week or so earlier, about 1 kilometer away from the first Mark I, you could get the job done. Well, how is that possible? Well, first of all, the landing Mark I rendezvous with the Orion in near rectilinear halo orbit. Then you have the two astronauts, just two astronauts, that's all Artemis 3 calls for, transfer over to the Mark I. It descends down to the lunar surface. At the same time, another Mark I designed for ascent was delivered directly to the moon. No near rectilinear halo orbit rendezvous, none of that. It makes its way to the surface of the moon, and the whole point to that is it will have enough fuel left over to return to near rectilinear halo orbit and rendezvous with Orion. Yeah, that's complicated. Two landers to get the job done that really only one lander should have been able to do, but we are trying to pound a square peg into a round hole here, and this is the best way to do it. So, of course, the obvious question is, what's the point? Why are we utilizing so many resources, so many craft, and so many launches? Because we would need 2 New Glenn rockets in order to deploy both of these Mark I landers, plus SLS, plus Orion, just to put 2 astronauts down on the surface of the moon for 1 week and essentially do nothing. What would the point of this actually be, and why would it matter even if you did beat China to the surface of the moon? Well, there's something else that you can do, some other preparatory work that can be done with the Artemis 3 mission if you're utilizing 2 landers. The second lander, the Ascent lander, can have some cargo on board, specifically 2 metric tons worth of digging robots, or digging and construction robots, and their job is to build a landing pad for the larger Blue Moon and for lunar starships use in the future, because both of these spacecraft are significantly top heavy. Unlike Apollo and unlike any design that has successfully landed on the moon thus far, any thin, tall, top-heavy lander has toppled over thus far, the best way, the best solution that we can get to provide an excellent landing surface for Blue Moon Mark II, and especially for Starship, is to build a landing pad. So what I have proposed is 2 metric tons worth of excavation, digging, and construction robots, which will be guided and put into operation during the astronauts' 1-week stay on the lunar surface. And then they will be allowed to continue their work after the astronauts depart. But during the more difficult times, the initial stage required in order to build the landing pad in the first place, the astronauts will be there to help guide them along. So here's why this plan could work. First of all, it addresses the Starship delays head on. Artemis 3 needs a crewed landing now, or as soon as Orion and SLS are ready in 2026 to 2027. Blue Moon Mark I is more mature. Blue Origin's Pathfinder demo is targeting a 2026 landing on the moon, without crew, of course, with NASA payloads already manifested. Modifying 2 Mark Is for human rating, in other words, adding life support and abort systems, is feasible since the Mark II crewed version is already under a $3.4 billion NASA contract for Artemis 5. So the split mirrors Apollo's lunar module design, but skips a fully integrated human landing system. Now, as far as the fuel surplus on the Ascent lander is concerned, it's very true. The Ascent Mark I skips the non-rectilinear halo orbit rendezvous docking, saving 200 to 300 meters per second worth of delta V, which is approximately 20 to 30% of Blue Moon Mark I's propellant. With Mark I's wet mass of 21 tons or so, including 15 to 18 tons worth of hydrolox, it could land 3 tons of payload plus the extra fuel for rendezvous with the Orion after liftoff. So you're saving additional fuel by sending it straight to the moon, the Ascent lander that is, and you have enough payload left over for the excavation robots. The humans kick off excavation and the robot finishes autonomously. In order to build a 15-meter diameter landing pad for Starship's 9-meter legs, this would require 1,000 to 2,000 cubic meters worth of regolith moved, sintered, or compacted. Humans plus robots could prep 20 to 30% of this in 7 days, and then the robots complete it in 1 to 3 months, in time for Starship to carry out a full-fledged lunar landing for Artemis 4. And as far as the timeline fit is concerned, you launch 2 New Glenn rockets in 2026 through 2027, synchronized with the SLS and Orion launch. The total added cost would be $1 to $2 billion, but accelerates landing by a minimum of 1 to 2 years, and probably more than that. Alright, so with Grok's help, I also checked out the feasibility of each piece of this plan. First of all, the descent lander rendezvous with Orion in near rectilinear halo orbit. It gives it a feasibility rating of 8 out of 10 because of Mark I's precision landing capability utilizing LiDAR. It also works for its docking with Orion, and Orion, of course, has a docking system of its own, and then it transfers 2 astronauts via EVA or a short tunnel of some kind. The drawback, of course, is you're docking in an unstable near rectilinear halo orbit with a period of 7 days, requires about 1 to 200 meters per second worth of delta V in order to take care of that, which is one of the reasons why you need a separate Ascent lander. Then you have the ascent lander part of the equation, and that has a medium-high level of feasibility, a 7 out of 10. Again, according to Grok, a direct cislunar injection via New Glenn saves fuel for a 3-ton robot payload. And in addition to that, the extra fuel allows the ascent lander to return toward the Orion as long as it doesn't have to do any extra maneuvering. Just a straight shot to low lunar orbit and then a landing. Precision landing, by the way, to less than 1 kilometer away from the descent lander. You don't want to get a lot closer than that because some debris from the landing might cause damage to the other lander. And 1 kilometer would be a very doable hike. Apollo astronauts hiked a lot further than that during some of the Apollo missions. Then you have the crew surface op. That only has a 6 out of 10, but that's because of the difficulty of excavating all of that regolith in untested Axiom suits. 1 to 200 cubic meters worth of regolith being excavated with the help of shovels and small rovers, that sort of thing. It's a hell of a lot of work in 1 week, but at the same time, definitely worth it for future missions if you can get a landing pad started. Then as far as ascent and return to Orion is concerned, a high level of feasibility, 8 out of 10, because all the surplus fuel will enable a 100-kilometer ascent to low lunar orbit and then the near rectilinear halo orbit rendezvous with Orion. So finally, the overall mission cost and risk is a medium level of feasibility of 7 out of 10 with $2 to $3 billion being invested. It's really not a whole lot more than that because Blue Origin is already working on a life support system for their Mark II lander. All they need to do is just modify what they're already building for a smaller lander capable of carrying 2 astronauts and minimal payload. So the pros beyond just landing sooner than Lunar Starship is going to be able to pull it off is it builds redundancy using a Blue Moon as a backup to Lunar Starship. Even if it's not successful, it's still handy to have this available, and it also tests in situ resource utilization early, regolith handling for water and oxygen extraction, and creates a Starship-ready infrastructure, reducing plume erosion risks because Starship is probably going to kick up at least 10 to 20 tons worth of regolith per landing, blasting all of this regolith, some of it possibly ending up in lunar orbit. If you have a treated landing pad, you might be able to eliminate those problems. And as far as expense is concerned, really a lot of this has already been paid for. The estimated cost is $800 million to $1 billion for 2 Blue Moon Mark I cargo landers. That's the base cost for those 2. And then you have human-rated modifications made for the descent and ascent landers, about $200 to $300 million invested because it's already based on a life support system that's being built for the Mark II anyway. Then the digger and construction robots, about $100 million or so. 2 New Glenn launches, that's about $150 million for both combined. Integration and testing being $300 to $400 million. Crew and surface ops being $100 to $150 million, but you'd be paying that regardless. And then contingency and overhead of another $300 million to $500 million, meaning the total cost for the full mission is $2.5 to $3.5 billion. A pathetically small amount of money compared to the advantage of setting down on the moon first, beating China to the punch, and establishing a tangible piece of property to eventually establish a base on that China will have a difficult time legitimately getting a hold of, given the fact that NASA will have done all of the construction first. And for the naysayers who claim that this solution cannot possibly be implemented in time, well, I think that it has a much better chance of happening prior to Starship becoming a mature system. The life support and crew cabin for Starship has not been fabricated yet. The rocket has yet to go to orbit. There's yet to be a single test implemented for in-orbit refueling, and 10 successful missions will have to take place in order to get one HLS system to near rectilinear halo orbit to rendezvous. There are so many milestones that Starship has yet to accomplish, and this solution would only require that you add a life support system and human rating to the Mark 1 lander, a lander that will be ready to land on the surface of the moon for an unmanned mission anyway by next year. In my opinion, that is doable in a couple of years, and a 2028 Artemis 3 mission landing on the moon a full 2 years before China can is entirely possible. And not only that, it establishes landing facilities for Starship for a future Artemis mission. And that could be Artemis 4 or perhaps Artemis 5, depending on how long it takes to bring Starship up to a full level of maturity. And depending on how much work Lockheed Martin has been doing behind our backs on their lunar lander, they might be a potential replacement for one or both of these landers as well. Even though they haven't done as much work as Blue Origin has, the crew cabin up here is actually what Lockheed Martin was going to build for the lunar lander that Blue Origin proposed in the first place. That is to say, the National Team lander. And even though I was not a big fan of that lander, this Lockheed Martin design, with the same crew cabin but a much more squat landing assembly that's closer to the ground, I think is a far better solution. And Lockheed Martin might be given a shot of trying to get this accomplished as well. Although really, when it comes down to it, I don't think they've done enough work to be as mature in their development as Blue Origin is. But if they have something surprising to show NASA in their proposal, they might be a big part of this plan. So once again, to re-emphasize, this is probably going to be Jared Isaacman's most critical point that he's going to have to deal with during his Senate confirmation, and the most critical objective that he has to accomplish during the short amount of time that he's got as NASA administrator. Because after all, he has a lot less time than most NASA administrators. He was going through the confirmation process a bit late anyway during the summer, and then got everything yanked, and we had all this confusion with Duffy maybe taking over the role and bundling NASA into the Department of Transportation. Thank God he didn't get to do that. And now we have Isaacman again, and he's lost at least 5 months, probably 6, because it's going to be very difficult for Congress to confirm him during this government shutdown. And then with Thanksgiving and Christmas approaching, he may not get confirmed until January, in which case he's got 3 years to get the job done, to get all of Artemis's different pieces, all the pieces of the puzzle in the Artemis plan together, functional and mature and safe, most of all, and to put human beings on the surface of the moon by the time he leaves his position at the beginning of 2029, if indeed he does what Trump wants him to do, gets humans on the moon before Trump leaves office. Let me tell you something, that's going to be a really tall order, very difficult thing to do, and he needs to have as many irons in the fire as possible. We need to look at alternatives. We need to have side-by-side competing endeavors, and I think given the fact that Congress doesn't want to lose this race to China, I find it very, very likely that they're going to go for this. But time will tell. We don't even know if Jared Isaacman is going to be confirmed. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Once again, if you'd like to check out the merchandise, all of that is also in the description. And until next time, stay angry about space.